Alright, let's sleep. Pull the blankets up to your chin. Fluff your pillow. Turn off your phone and let the darkness settle around you like a soft, warm cloak. Tonight, we're going to travel back in time to a world of dense rainforests and vast savannas, of mighty rivers and ancient kingdoms, of a woman who refused to bow to anyone, not to kings, not to colonizers, not to the forces of history itself. We're going to meet a queen who ruled with iron will and warrior skill, who outmaneuvered empires and outlasted her enemies, and who, in the end, became a symbol of resistance that still inspires millions today. Her name was Nzinga. But before we get to the thrones and the battles, the diplomacy and the daring escapes, we need to understand the world into which she was born, a world of kings and captives, of Portuguese forts and African kingdoms, of a struggle for power that would shape the destiny of an entire continent. Part 1, The Kingdom of Ndongo. The year is approximately 1583. The place is the Kingdom of Ndongo, in what is now northern Angola, in southwestern Africa. The kingdom lies inland from the Atlantic coast, on the high plateau between the Kwanza and Luanda rivers. It is a land of rolling hills, dense forests, and fertile valleys, where the Mbanda people have lived for centuries, farming, trading, and building a sophisticated society. The Kingdom of Ndongo is ruled by Ngola, a king who holds both political and spiritual authority. The Ngola is the supreme leader, the commander of the armies, and the mediator between the people and the ancestors. He is surrounded by a court of nobles, priests, and advisors, and he commands the loyalty of the regional chiefs who govern the various provinces. The capital of Ndongo is a city called Kabasa, a bustling center of trade and administration. Here, the Ngola holds court, dispenses justice, and receives tribute from his subjects. The kingdom is prosperous, thanks to its control over the trade routes that connect the interior of Africa to the coast. Ivory, copper, and slaves pass through Ndongo on their way to the Portuguese traders who have established a foothold on the coast. But the Portuguese are not content to stay on the coast. They want access to the interior, to the gold and silver that they believe lie beyond the mountains. They want to control the slave trade, to expand their territory, and to convert the people of Ndongo to Christianity. And they are willing to use force to achieve their goals. For decades, the Portuguese have been pushing inland, building forts, establishing alliances with local chiefs, and raiding villages for slaves. The Kingdom of Ndongo has fought back, but the Portuguese have superior weapons, guns, cannons, and steel swords, and they are relentless. This is the world into which Nzinga is born, a world of war and diplomacy, of survival and resistance. Part 2, The Birth of a Warrior. Nzinga is born into the royal family of Ndongo. Her father is Ngola Mbande, the king of Ndongo, a powerful and respected ruler who has fought the Portuguese for decades. Her mother is Ngola Kum, one of her father's favorite concubines. According to tradition, Nzinga is born with her umbilical cord wrapped around her neck. For this reason, she is given her name, which comes from the Kimbunda word kujinga, meaning to twist or to rotate. It is an unusual name, a name that suggests something strange, something powerful, something destined for greatness. Nzinga grows up in the royal court of Kabasa, surrounded by the luxury and intrigue of palace life. She is trained as a warrior, learning to fight alongside her father and brothers. She learns to ride, to shoot, to wield a sword, and to command troops. She also learns the arts of diplomacy and politics, how to negotiate, how to manipulate, and how to survive in a world where betrayal is always a possibility. But Nzinga's childhood is not a happy one. The kingdom is under constant pressure from the Portuguese, who are expanding their territory and their influence. Her father, Ngola Mbande, is killed in 1617 by his own people after a series of disastrous conflicts with the Portuguese. The kingdom is plunged into chaos. Nzinga's brother, Ngola Mbande, seizes power. He secures his position by killing anyone he deems a threat, especially his male relatives and members of the court. Nzinga's own infant son is included in the bloodbath. Ngola Mbande lets Nzinga and her sisters live, but he has them sterilized so that they cannot bear any future challengers to his throne. It is a brutal introduction to the realities of power. Nzinga learns that in the world of kings and queens, there is no room for sentiment. She learns to be ruthless, to be cunning, and to trust no one. Part 3, The Diplomat. Despite her brother's cruelty, Nzinga serves him faithfully. She is a skilled diplomat, and her brother recognizes her talents. In 1622, he sends her to negotiate a peace treaty with the Portuguese. The negotiations take place at the Portuguese encampment in Luanda, on the coast. Nzinga arrives with a retinue of attendants, dressed in her finest clothes, determined to represent her brother and her kingdom with dignity. The Portuguese, either through ignorance or in an attempt to insult her, provide her with only a mat to sit on at the meeting. It is a deliberate slight, a way of telling her that she is beneath them, that she is not worthy of a chair. Nzinga is not deterred. She orders one of her servants to bend and serve as her chair, asserting her right to sit on the same level as the Portuguese. It is a brilliant move, a gesture of defiance that shows the Portuguese that she will not be humiliated, that she is their equal. The negotiations go well. Nzinga converts to Catholicism and takes the name de Sousa. She signs a peace treaty with the Portuguese, and she returns to her brother in triumph. But the peace does not last. The Portuguese continue to expand their territory and their influence, and the relations between Ndongo and the colonizers deteriorate. Part 4, The Queen. In 1624, Nzinga's brother, Ngola Mbande, either dies by suicide or is killed by Nzinga herself. The historical record is unclear, but the result is the same. Nzinga is now the ruler of Ndongo. She is to rule as regent for her nephew, but she murders him, which gives her the opening to claim the throne for herself. It is a ruthless act, but Nzinga knows that she cannot afford to be weak. She has seen what happens to those who are not ruthless enough to hold on to power. The Portuguese, however, do not accept her rule. They support another claimant to the throne, a rival named Ngola Mbande, who has been baptized as Felipe I de Sousa. Together, they succeed in pushing Nzinga out of most of Ndongo territory in 1626. Nzinga is forced to flee. She is a queen without a kingdom, a ruler without a throne. But she does not give up. Part 5, The Warrior Queen. Nzinga transforms herself. She is no longer just a diplomat, she is a warrior. She allies herself with the Mbangala, a warrior group from the central highlands of Angola who often serve as mercenary soldiers. She completes the rituals necessary to become one of their leaders. For the next 30 years, she personally leads troops into battle and wages guerrilla war against the Portuguese. In the early 1630s, Nzinga conquers the neighboring kingdom of Matamba. She makes it her new base, using it as a launching point for attacks against the Portuguese. She rules Matamba with an iron fist, but she also governs wisely, building alliances with local groups and establishing a stable administration. Nzinga also becomes a prolific slave trader. It is a controversial aspect of her reign, but Nzinga is a pragmatist. She knows that the slave trade is the foundation of the Portuguese economy, and she uses it to her advantage. She trades slaves for guns, ammunition, and other goods that she needs to fight her war. Part 6, The Alliance with the Dutch. In the 1640s, Nzinga sees an opportunity to strike a blow against the Portuguese. The Dutch, who are also vying for control of the Atlantic trade, have established a presence in Angola. They are rivals of the Portuguese, and they are willing to ally with anyone who can weaken their enemy. Nzinga sends ambassadors to the Dutch, and they agree to an alliance. In 1641, the Dutch capture Luanda, the Portuguese capital in Angola, with Nzinga's support. Nzinga recaptures much of the territory she had lost, and she establishes her authority over a vast region. For a brief moment, it seems that Nzinga has won. She is at the height of her power, ruling almost 1/4 of modern-day northern Angola. But the Dutch are not reliable allies. In 1648, the Portuguese recapture Luanda, and the Dutch are forced to withdraw. Nzinga is once again on the defensive. But she does not give up. She continues to resist the Portuguese, using guerrilla tactics and diplomatic maneuvering. Part 7, The Peace. In 1656, after decades of war, Nzinga finally makes peace with the Portuguese. The treaty recognizes her as the ruler of Matamba. It is not a complete victory, she never regains Ndongo, and the Portuguese remain a powerful presence in the region, but it is a recognition of her authority. Nzinga is now an old woman. She is in her 70s, and she is tired. She has spent most of her life fighting, negotiating, and surviving. She converts to Christianity, again, and she lives out her final years in relative peace. On December 17, 1663, Nzinga dies. She is about 80 years old, an extraordinary age for a woman who had spent so many years in war and hardship. She is succeeded by her sister Kambu. Part 8, The Legacy. Nzinga's legacy is immense. She is remembered as one of the greatest female rulers in African history, a woman who rivaled Elizabeth I of England and Catherine the Great of Russia in political cunning and military prowess. She is a national heroine in Angola, revered as the mother of the nation. Her statue stands in the center of Luanda, the capital of Angola, a symbol of resistance and independence. Her story is told in books, in songs, and in folk religions. She is a symbol of African strength, resilience, and dignity. But Nzinga's legacy is also complex. She was a pragmatist who engaged in the slave trade. She was a ruthless ruler who murdered her nephew and sterilized her sisters. She was a woman who lived in a world of violence and exploitation, and she used the tools of that world to survive. Nevertheless, Nzinga's story is one of extraordinary courage and determination. She refused to be defeated, refused to be humiliated, refused to be silenced. She fought for her people, her kingdom, and her honor. And she won. Part 9, The Lessons. What can we learn from Nzinga's story? First, courage is not the absence of fear, it is the refusal to be defeated by it. Nzinga faced countless challenges throughout her life, the loss of her father, the brutality of her brother, the betrayal of the Portuguese, the loss of her kingdom. But she never gave up. She always found a way to survive, to adapt, and to fight back. Second, diplomacy is a weapon. Nzinga was not just a warrior, she was also a diplomat. She negotiated with the Portuguese, she made alliances with the Dutch, she used her wits to outmaneuver her enemies. She understood that sometimes words are more powerful than swords. Third, ruthlessness is sometimes necessary. Nzinga was willing to do whatever it took to achieve her goals. She murdered her nephew, she allied with mercenaries, she engaged in the slave trade. She was not a saint, and we should not pretend that she was. But she was a survivor, and she did what she had to do to survive. Fourth, leadership is about service. Nzinga ruled for decades, and she was a capable and effective ruler. She protected her people, she fought for their independence, and she gave them a sense of hope and dignity. She was a queen who served her people, not herself. And finally, the past is not a foreign country. Nzinga lived 400 years ago, in a world that was very different from our own. But her struggles and triumphs are still relevant today. She fought for freedom, she resisted oppression, and she refused to be silenced. She was a feminist before the word existed, a trailblazer who paved the way for generations of women to come. Part 10, The Dream. Now, as you drift off to sleep, think about Nzinga. Imagine her as a young girl, training as a warrior, learning to fight and to lead. Imagine her at the Portuguese encampment, refusing to sit on a mat, ordering her servant to be her chair. Imagine her in battle, leading her troops against the Portuguese, her sword raised high, her voice calling out commands. Imagine her in exile, fleeing her kingdom, but refusing to give up. Imagine her in Matamba, building a new kingdom, making new alliances, preparing for the next fight. Imagine her in old age, tired but unbowed, looking back on a life of struggle and achievement. And then imagine her legacy, the statue in Luanda, the songs in the villages, the stories in the books. Imagine the millions of people who have been inspired by her example, who have found strength in her courage, who have refused to bow to anyone. Nzinga is gone, but she is not forgotten. She lives on in the stories we tell, in the history we study, in the culture we celebrate. She is a reminder that even the most unlikely people can change the world, that a woman from a small kingdom in Africa can challenge the mightiest empires and win. Part 11, The Final Reflection. So tonight, as you lie in your warm bed, in your safe home, surrounded by the people you love, think about Nzinga. Think about her courage, her intelligence, her resilience. Think about her refusal to be silenced, her determination to live life on her own terms. And let her story inspire you to be brave, to be bold, and to never give up. Nzinga lived in a world of kings and captives, of Portuguese forts and African kingdoms, of violence and exploitation. She faced challenges that we can barely imagine. But she refused to be defeated. She fought, she led, she ruled, and she won. And her story, like the woman herself, will never be forgotten. Sleep well. Sleep deeply. And may your dreams be filled with the sound of drums, the sight of warriors, and the spirit of a queen who would not kneel. Good night.